Mrs. Aveeno had been shocked when the sweet 9-year-old had refused to leave her classroom, claiming the man who was coming to pick her up was not her father. Trying to coax the girl out of the room, Emma made a shocking statement. Mrs. Aveeno paled as she looked at the man quickly grabbing her phone to call 911. But before we start, smash the like button and make sure to subscribe if you haven't and hit that notification bell so that you won't miss any new stories. Lillian looked at Emma, how her small fingers gently went over the pages of her book. Her eyes slowly went over the page as she absorbed the story about witches. When the bell finally rang, indicating the start of the weekend, all the kids started to grab their belongings, pack their little backpacks, and run outside to meet their parents to go home. Emma had started to pack, shooting a glance to the schoolyard before she stopped in her tracks and sat back down. Kids were filing out of the room, and after some time, Emma remained the only one to Mrs. Aveeno's confusion. It hadn't taken long for Lillian to finish cleaning up the classroom and noticing how Emma still sat there, reading. With a gentle smile on her lips, "Emma," she started, "I understand that your book is super-duper interesting, but it is the weekend and it is time to go home." Her choice to ignore the teacher left Lillian completely stunned. As she peered outside, she saw how most parents and their children had left, how some parents or guardians were still standing, waiting for their little ones to come out, and even some kids were waiting outside for their parents. Mrs. Aveeno knew Emma's parents. They had come by a couple of times, and she was sure to recognize a man outside as Emma's father. The man tried to look inside, his eyes partially squinting, and Lillian offered a wave. However, Emma's father either didn't seem to notice or ignored the teacher. She turned back to the kid, who was still reading away, though remained on the same page for longer than Lillian anticipated regarding Emma's reading level. "Emma, you need to go. Your father is waiting for you," she said, and Emma stiffened. There was sheer panic in the girl's eyes, which only confused Mrs. Aveeno more. She stood up, moving only an inch away from the girl before her small hands clasped around Lillian's hand. "Please don't," Emma pleaded. "Then come with me to meet your dad." But at this, Emma only closed her eyes, shaking her head furiously, and held Mrs. "It's all right, Emma. Just breathe with me," she whispered soothingly, attempting to anchor the child's erratic heartbeats. Drawing in a ragged breath, Emma looked up at her teacher, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Please, Mrs. Aveeno, don't let him take me," she pleaded in a voice barely above a whisper. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, Mrs. Aveeno swiftly decided on a course of action. "Lucas," she whispered, summoning a student from the corner, "I need you to quietly go get Ms. Dalton. Tell her it's urgent." The boy nodded, sensing the importance of his mission, and slipped out of the room, shoes barely making a sound. Once informed, Miss Dalton's face grew taut with concern. "All right, I'll call Emma's mother and see if she knows about this," she said, her fingers quickly dialing the familiar number. The haunting tone of the voicemail greeted Miss Dalton's ears, amplifying the eerie silence of the room. "This is Anna. Please leave a message," chimed the recorded voice, only deepening the sinking feeling in their stomachs. Outside, shadows cast by the flickering hallway lights revealed a man pacing back and forth, his impatient footfalls echoing through the corridor. Emma's eyes, filled with terror, met Mrs. Aveeno's. In a hushed whisper, barely audible, she revealed her secret. "He's not my dad." The chilling confession sent shivers down Mrs. "We need to reach Emma's mother immediately," she whispered, the urgency clear in her tone. Every moment was crucial now, and one misstep could have unimaginable consequences. Nervously dialing the number saved under Emma's mom in the school database, Mrs. Aveeno waited with bated breath, praying for a response. The silence of the room was deafening as the phone rang, only interrupted by Emma's soft sniffles. The voice that finally answered was fraught with confusion, giving Mrs. through the receiver. Emma's mother's voice trembled. "I never sent him. I didn't ask my husband or anyone else to pick her up today." Aveeno's heart dropped. There was a pause on the other line, and then Emma's mother whispered, realization dawning. "That can't be him. What if it's—" The chilling implication hung in the air. Mrs. Aveeno's voice became firm, resolute. "Listen to me. I promise I'll keep Emma safe. Do whatever you need to do and call us back as soon as possible." Peeking discreetly through the blinds, Mrs. Aveeno noticed something unsettling. The man was not on the phone, nor did he seem to be expecting a call. In a hushed, shaky voice, Emma's mother began recounting a story, a piece of their family's history they'd hoped to bury forever. His brother, my ex-husband, he never accepted our divorce and blamed Emma for it. The revelation was startling. Emma wasn't just a random target. This was personal, and the history ran deep. Mr. Patterson approached the entrance, attempting to defuse the situation with a calm demeanor. "Sir, we're going to need to see some identification," he stated. Meanwhile, in the background, Mrs. Aveeno discreetly dialed 911, ensuring they were ready to intervene if the situation escalated beyond their control. Surprisingly, the man didn't hesitate. He quickly produced an ID from his wallet, which, upon first glance, seemed legitimate. Mr. Patterson examined it, noting the photo's uncanny resemblance to the man before him. His name and credentials, all seemingly authentic, caused a momentary lapse in judgment. Despite the man's seemingly valid ID, Mrs. Aveeno remained unwavering in her determination to keep Emma shielded. "She will not be leaving this classroom, not until I'm certain of your intentions." Her voice held a firm resolve. Two patrol cars pulled up in quick succession, their flashing lights casting an eerie glow on the school's facade. Officers leaped out, assessing the situation and preparing for a possible confrontation. Their presence bolstered the school's spirit. The officers, trained to handle such situations, swiftly moved in, restraining the man. Handcuffs clicked into place, and despite his protests, he was led towards the patrol car. "You don't understand," he shouted, his voice echoing eerily across the schoolyard. But the officers weren't taking any chances. Safety was their primary concern. A familiar car screeched to a halt near the school's entrance. Emma's real parents emerged, their faces etched with anxiety. "Is she all right?" her mother cried out, looking desperately for her daughter among the gathered crowd. As they reached Mrs. Aveeno, Emma's father hesitated, then sighed deeply. "That man, he's my twin brother," he admitted, guilt evident in his eyes. "We've been estranged for years." He explained how a rift had grown between them, resulting in years of resentment and envy. Going through the man's possessions, officers discovered incriminating evidence. Notes detailing plans to abduct Emma and demand a ransom from her wealthy parents. Emma, looking small and fragile amidst the commotion, finally saw her parents. The world seemed to stop as they rushed to her, pulling her into a tight embrace. With tears still in their eyes, Emma's parents approached Mrs. Aveeno. "Words can't express our gratitude," Emma's mother whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Holding the teacher's hands tightly, the father added, "You didn't just protect our daughter, you protected her future." Mrs. Aveeno, humbled, just nodded, understanding the weight of the day. The events of that fateful day echoed through the corridors and classrooms. Students whispered in hushed tones, teachers held emergency meetings, and parents flooded the phone lines with concerns. The case against the imposter became a local sensation. Newspaper headlines blared details of the arrest, and the community watched intently as the court proceedings began. With overwhelming evidence against him and witnesses ready to testify, the man faced the full force of the law, a reckoning for his sinister intentions. The incident sent ripples throughout Sunset Elementary, prompting a thorough review of security measures. The school implemented a stringent pickup protocol involving ID verification and an updated emergency contact system. "Safety first, always," became the school's renewed motto, a lesson learned from a day they'd never forget. The bonds among Emma's classmates solidified, forged in the crucible of shared experience. Playground games became more inclusive, and support during challenging academic tasks grew. This unity, a testament to their resilience, proved that when faced with adversity, they were indeed stronger together.